Hello, my name is Brian Rocks, and we are going to model this chalkboard here. This will be part one of, I don't know, 3-part series where we're going to model, we're going to unwrap and texture, and of course render the object itself. So this is what we will end up with here. It's fairly straightforward, pretty simple. I actually wanted to make this because I needed it as a prop for another environment model I have. So this should be pretty easy. I'm not going to go through like exactly what button presses to take when navigating around the interface. At points I will, but I have previous videos on how to navigate the interface, and how to perform the various basic functions that we'll be doing here. Because there's nothing too terribly complicated. I hope it's clear enough for you. So with that said, we can go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and delete this cube. And let's hit 5 on the number pad to go into orthographic view, and then 1 for front view. So Shift A to add a plane, and then align to view so we can see it. Now let's go ahead and create the thickness for our wood frame around the chalkboard. So I'm going to hit Tab to go in edit mode, hit I to create an inset, and go ahead and move this in. Give your border some thickness. That looks good. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut this in half and delete this left half here, because I want to use a mirror modifier. So we only have to model half of the model. We can just use the mirror modifier on most of it to mirror everything that we do on the right side onto the left. So go ahead and hit Control R, and this will allow you to create a edge loop or loop cut. And you can left click and move this to wherever you need, but we want it in the center, so just right click and that'll move it back. I'm going to go into wireframe mode, which is Z. Deselect everything, and then go ahead and border select this outside vertices and delete them. I'm going to go back in the object mode, and I want to go ahead and select the modifier tab, and we will add a mirror modifier. You can see it's mirrored across the x-axis, and we want to enable clipping, which will keep these vertices from ripping apart if you happen to move them. So go into edit mode, and we'll select these vertices and move them out and give it some width, and deselect and then select these top ones to give the board the right size here. That looks fine. And what we can do is choose the face select here and select this face and delete that. So now go into side view, just 3 on your number pad, and hit A to select everything, and then E to extrude, and we'll make the thickness of the board frame here. Let's see. Should be good. Go ahead and hit A until everything is selected. Or go ahead and just move this until it looks pretty centered. With the face select mode on, you can see we have the side face, which has the center mark, and we can kind of use that to judge if we're centered. So that looks good. Doesn't have to be exactly perfect. So I'm going to go into shaded view, and you can see after we extruded, we have these black faces here, which means the face normals are facing in the wrong direction, and we want to fix this. So edit mode, A until you select everything. Over in the shading and UV tab here, hit recalculate, and that will fix it up for you. So object mode, I'm going to go ahead and deselect everything, and then we'll go back into front view. Let's create the leg supports. So Shift A, and we're going to do a cube this time. And I want to leave the object origin in the center since we're going to be mirroring everything we create over here. So if you notice, if you move just the object in object mode, the center goes along with it. Tab into edit mode, A to make sure everything's selected, and then we'll just grab it. And you can notice that the object origin stays put. So just move that over and just leave a little bit of a gap there for where the board can pivot. You can actually deselect everything. I'm going to go back into vertex select here. Make sure everything's deselected and go ahead and select these outside vertices, and we'll make the width of the leg here. And select these bottom vertices and drag them down. Kind of zoom out to give yourself a better view of what it's going to look like here. And I think that should be good. We can always adjust it later. Actually deselect that and then select these top ones. I'm going to move them up a little bit. And we need to shrink this over here. So deselect everything and S and Y to scale it along the Y-axis, and we'll give it some width there. And I hit Z to look at the shading mode, and kind of want that thinner, so go ahead and select these outer vertices, and well, you know what, I'm going to leave it actually just as it is. Go into side view, and let's go ahead and select everything, all the vertices of this support leg. Shift D to duplicate, and you can see it's duplicated. I'm just going to right click to put it back to where it was. R to rotate, and then 90 to rotate it 90 degrees. And we'll bring it down here. And you can see by duplicating the vertices, and you go into object mode, you have now created, it still remains one object. If we were to duplicate, like say this object, I'm going to duplicate it, move it back here, then you hit tab to edit mode, only this portion of the object is editable because you duplicated in object mode, so you created a brand new object. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. But when you duplicate, like say vertices, and then reposition them, you're basically adding to that initial object. So go ahead and S and Y to scale this down. Kind of move it about, give yourself a good look. So I think that should be good, and then I want to go back in the side view here. I'm going to deselect these, and I just want to select the bottom part and give myself a little flatter leg there. There we go, that looks good. Now we want to create these angled cross beams here. So in order to, instead of hitting B to border select and trying to get around all these here, because we don't want these 4 vertices selected, just select one vertice on this bottom bar here, and then with your cursor over that selection, hit L, and that will select everything that is connected to this vertice. So back into side view, go ahead and Shift D to duplicate. I'm just going to move it up, doesn't matter. Hit R 45 to rotate it 45 degrees, and we'll just position it where we like. So it's going to connect here and here, so just wherever you think it looks good. So I think that'll be fine. And what we're going to do is, sorry, I had to move my mic there. Instead of scaling this down and making sure it stays the same width, I'm going to go ahead and cut this on each of these sides here. So you can go ahead and deselect everything, zoom in so you can get a good look at what you're doing, hit K for the knife tool. And if you look down here at the bottom, you have all the functions for the knife tool. We're going to use C to constrain the angle to a straight line, and then Z so it cuts through this actual post that we created. And then you will left click and then spacebar to actually cut. So here we go. It's going to go close to the edge here. You don't have to be on. If you notice when you hit the edges, it'll create a little dot. You can start from there. I found that it works a little better if you go right outside where you want. Just left click and then drag down. I'm going to hit C to constrain that angle, then Z to make sure it cuts through the object, and then left click and then spacebar. And you have cut through this object here. So back in the side view, we'll do the same thing down here. I'm just going to deselect everything. K for your knife tool, and we will left click and C to constrain the angle, Z to cut through, left click, and then spacebar. So I can deselect these, and we want to just delete these sets of vertices. So B to border select, and then select each of those, and then delete the vertices. So there we go. We got the crossbar here. It looks pretty good. Now we want to duplicate this, just mirror it over here. So just right click on one of these vertices and make sure your cursor's over it. Hit L so all of them are selected. And then go ahead and Shift D to duplicate. I'm just showing you that it's duplicated. Just right click to put it back. Then we can go here to mesh and then mirror, and we want to do Y. And you see that it's mirroring around the center of the object. And we want to mirror around this center line where the 3D cursor is. I just right clicked to reset it. So your cursor should be on the center axis here. If it happens, when you left click, it moves. So if it happens to be off center, just Shift C to make sure it's centered. And we're going to go ahead and change the pivot point to 3D cursor, and then mesh, mirror, and Y, since we're mirroring along the Y axis here. So there we have the, whoops, I have to do that again because I didn't left click to set it. So mesh, mirror, Y, left click. There we go. So now we have the leg made for the chalkboard, and we'll mirror this over to create the second one. But as you can see, we have the same problem we had with the chalkboard frame. And so I'm going to just right click one of these and hit L and then recalculate. So now it looks sort of like it's supposed to. So I'm going to go into front view, and with that object selected, go ahead and add the mirror modifier, and it's already set for X, and you don't need the clipping since none of the vertices of these touch each other, so that doesn't matter. It's only when the vertices touch, like here, when you're mirroring an object that's along the axis point here. So now we have the main part of the board done here. We need to do the chalk tray and then the two support beams. So in front view, I'm just going to go ahead with, make sure everything's deselected. Just add a cube. Then I'm going to, since we don't really need to mirror this chalk tray for anything, it doesn't matter whether you move it in edit mode or object mode. So I'm just going to move it down. I'm going to Shift Z. And you can see it's scaling a little different than what we did earlier because it's scaling around the center, the 3D cursor as the pivot point since we have that selected. So I'm going to go back to median point and scale Z. And we'll make it yay thick there. I'm going to bring it down a bit. That should work. And an S and X to scale it along the X-axis. I'm going to zoom in and scale along the X again. There we go. And of course we need to go into side view and scale along the Y-axis this time to give us our chalk tray. I really don't remember, when I was a kid we had these all over the place, so I don't remember actually how wide those were, so I'm going to actually just select that and S and then Y, and I'll just make it as wide as go back into side view so I can see. That's good. I'll make it as wide as the board. I might go into front view here, and I was going to make it a little thinner, but that's fine. That looks good. So back into front view, and we want to make the cross beams here, the support. So let's go ahead and let's just use this chalk tray object, and we'll Shift D, and then I'm gonna R and 45 to rotate it. I'm gonna go into wireframe view here and move this over so that the board kind of meets up to the top of this, where the supports meet here. So I'm going to angle it a little bit so I can see it better, and then just G and then Z to move it down. There we go. I'm going back into front view. There we go, and we can do the same, knife cut deal here. So I'm going back into wireframe view. I'm going to deselect everything. K for your knife tool. Let's start here so I can see a little better. Left click and then C and then Z to make sure you're cutting through it. Left click and space. And navigate down where these meet, and we'll deselect everything with A and then K for your knife tool, and again left click, C, Z, left click and space. So now you can B to border select that, B again, and we can delete these vertices. And I'm going to move this object origin up to the center of the 3D cursor. So with in object mode with it selected, we can just set origin to a 3D cursor. Now when we add the mirror modifier to this, you can see it did mirror across, but it is in the wrong position because we had rotated this duplicate object to this position. So we need to reset that, so you can Control A, which will apply the rotation and scale, and there you go. So now we have the mostly completed chalkboard here. So I'm going to go into front view again, and we need to, of course, make the board. So Shift A and cube. I'm going to go into the wireframe again, just tab into edit mode and deselect everything because we just want to move this up into the frame. I'm going to move this up so I'm not sticking out of the bottom there. And then A to select everything, and then scale along the x-axis. Side view so we can scale along the y-axis and give our board appropriate thickness here. Oops. Let's see. Yeah, that looks good. Back in the front view and wireframe. So this is mostly completed. These boards usually had little pivot handles here that you could tighten or loosen and then flip the board around. It also had a trough for the chalk, which we can do with a boolean operator here. So let's do that. Let's actually move this to another layer so we can get all this stuff out of the way and see what we're doing. So right click to select the object here, and we will M to move, and then select layer 2. So now you can see it's missing, but you can see there is a indicator here that there's an object on layer 2. So you click layer 2, and now we can work with this without having to mess with any, have all that other stuff in the way. So I'm going to A to deselect everything, and we're going to go ahead and make this trough with a boolean operator, which you'll see how that works in a second here. So Shift A, and we're going to do a UV sphere. I'm going to R. Actually, right click, I'm not going to do anything. So you just create the UV sphere, and then I'm going to cut these segments down here to 24, and then change that to 12, just to reduce the poly count there. So let's hit R and then 90. Tab in edit mode and deselect everything. Actually, we can just leave that. I was going to cut it in half to make the trough, but since we're doing a boolean, we can just leave it as it is. What I do want to do is select these and hit E to extrude. So we just want to make a G and an X here. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and object mode. I'm going to just scale this down and bring it down here. Let's reset the origin to the geometry so it's in the center. I want to go ahead and move this to here. This might make it a little easier. Tab in edit mode, deselect everything, hit R to create an edge loop, and then just left click and then right click to make sure it's in the center. Let's get rid of this. So select all of that and then delete the vertices. I'm going to go into object mode, add a mirror modifier. Now it's probably going to be all messed up because I didn't have the let's see what I got here. There we go. So I just had to select this, Control A, and select the rotation and scale since we did scale it down and rotate it. Select clipping. So now we can just work with this half to resize to make sure we got a good size trough in here. Select everything. I want to make sure, grab X. I want to just make sure this is along the X. It is. I want to make sure that's in the center. So go in object mode, and then grab it, and then line that up. So we're just going to make everything symmetrical here. I'm just going to bring this in a little bit. Go into the side view. I'm going to go ahead and scale this down. And bring this down inside. So I'm going to hit scale and then Z to flatten this out a bit because it's not a exact, half circle in there. Make a trough. That. Of course, when I scaled it, I screwed the length up. So I'm just selecting these vertices and moving them back out. So that looks like it should be pretty good. Yeah, that should be good. We'll see what that looks like with the boolean operator. So I'm going to Control A. I'm going to reset the rotation and scale. Make sure this is done with that because sometimes you get some weird results if you don't. Shift C. I'm going to get my cursor back to where I want it. So, to do a boolean operator, you want to select the object you want operated on. First, right-click the object you're going to use to cut this trough. It is just called sphere, because when we select this object and when we add the boolean modifier, we want to make sure it's using the sphere. So you can see our cube disappeared because it's set to intersect. We should do difference, and you can see it's cut the trough into the cube. So we can apply this. You can right click to select the original sphere that we made. You can delete it, and now you can see that we have a trough for the chalk cut into your wood there. So now we can move this back to layer 1, so M and then 1. Then we can make layer 1 visible again. So now I'm going to deselect that. So now you can see you have the completed chalk tray and everything else. So the last thing we need to do is create the pivot knobs. So I'm going to go ahead and go into side view, wireframe mode, and then Shift A. I'm going to do a cylinder and then scroll down a little bit here to align to view. And I don't need 32 vertices, so I'm going to take it down. I'll take it down to 18. Just hit S to scale, and we'll scale this down to about right there. Go back into front view, move this over, move it up, and we want it to be in the center line of the chalkboard here, so it'll pivot correctly. So go ahead and select the chalkboard frame, hit tab to enter edit mode, and then I'm just going to do Control R to create the edge loop, left click, and then we'll right click to make sure it's in the center. Go into side view, and I want to just use that as an indicator of where to position this knob. But when I go into object mode, you can see I can't see the line that I made, but we can change that with the chalkboard frame selected. Go to the object tab, and we can display wire. What we can do is draw all edges. So now this will show us the center line here. So when we do select this knob, that center line is still showing. That's just a visualization tool to draw all edges. Our wireframe we really don't need checked. So this is kind of helpful sometimes when you just need to position stuff. I'm going to bring this back up, so the center point's on there. Come back out here and move that in. Go into edit mode, and we'll deselect all these and then just border select this. Make it about so thick there. Then of course there's the center pit, the screw basically. We can actually in object mode have this knob selected. That will shift D, and then I'm just going to scale it down like that. And I'm going to go back into front view, and then we'll move this in. I'm going to hit S and then X to scale it up a bit. So there's that. I'm going to actually put the center point back to where it should go. So I'll do that, and then of course our center point's all off here. Origin to geometry. There we go. So now we have the knob made, but they're not usually this sharp edged. So with the knob selected, I'm going to Control A and just set the rotation and scale. So our bevel, so I'm going to bevel this edge. So you can just deselect everything. If you hold Alt and right click on an edge, it's going to select an edge loop, so anything that's connected. It's just a quick way of selecting everything as well as the border select. To bevel this, we will Control B, and you can move your mouse, and you can see it's giving it a nice bevel, but it's still pretty flat. Use your scroll wheel. You can create, of course, a smoother edge. I'm just going to go with that. And then actually I'm going to Alt right click that. I'm going to Control B. I'm going to do the same thing, but on a lesser degree. So I'm just going to do one subdivision there with the scroll wheel and make it a little bit sharper. So in the front view you can see the difference. It still looks pretty jagged, but with that object selected, if you hit smooth, select that, hit smooth, and you have yourself a decent looking knob there. So all we have to do now is, I'm going to connect to these two, so select this, and then Control J. So to select more than one object, just select the object, hold Shift, and select the next object. So with that knob selected, and in order to mirror it correctly, I'm going to apply the rotation and scale again. I know I did it earlier, but never hurts. I'm going to move the object origin to the center point here. So origin to 3D cursor, and then I will go to the mod tab there and go ahead and hit mirror, and we have our second knob. So now we can apply these mirror modifiers. I'm not going to do that yet because in the next part we're going to go ahead and unwrap these in order to texture. So we'll just leave these as is, because if I applied it, then we would have two, separate objects, and it would be more to actually unwrap. So this way I can unwrap one, and then when you apply it, that unwrap will be applied to this part as well. But I'll explain all that in the next video. So there you have it. There is the modeling of the chalkboard, and we'll get to unwrapping and texturing this in part 2. Thank you for watching.